Michael DePlata. I'm the VP of Creative at Monolith.
Off the back of Shadow of Mordor, did you guys kind of expect the success and the acclaim it had? Was that a nice surprise?
We obviously, liked the game and have been working hard on it, but the level of the reception and the success really was a nice surprise. It was great, and it's what created the opportunity for us to come back and really do something so much more ambitious this time.
So what have Talion and Celebrimbor kind of been up to since Shadow of Mordor ended?
So at the end of Shadow of Mordor, when we left them, they'd sort of failed to defeat Sauron effectively, so they needed to increase their power. So the plan was the time has come for a new ring. And so they've been forging the new ring, and Celebrimbor is very much putting his power into this new ring in the same way that Sauron put his power into the One Ring. But of course Sauron's weaker now, he hasn't got the ring, so they really believe that with this they'll actually be able to challenge his power for supremacy in Mordor.
Okay, so what kind of powers does this new ring grant to Talion and Celebrimbor?
The key power of all the rings of power, the kind of power that's there in the name is the power of domination, the power to bend people to your will, the power also to, I guess, manipulate the minds of your enemies through terror or domination or power, and also just to enhance as well, really across the board, their skill in combat, the things that Celebrimbor is able to do in battle. We saw a little bit in the walkthrough of the Elven Wrath. He's able to unleash the spear that they can use in combat. So it's a general increase in their power and might, but in particular to build their army.
So specifically then, talking about the combat for a second that you mentioned, how have you kind of developed and evolved that for the new game?
I guess there's a lot of ways, but there's three main ways. One is through the enemies. So there's an enormously expanded variety and depth to the skills and abilities and behavior of the enemies you'll be facing that adds just a lot more variety and challenge. Secondly is on the player side is enormously expanding the skill system. So there's new abilities that you have, but also new ways to customize and optimize your kind of loadout of that abilities and how that can then work with the RPG elements of the gear system. Yeah. And just expanding what those abilities are with new weapons like the glaive and the heavy attack or the hammer to use in combat or different skills and so on there. And then finally through the balance of the game. So now we've got multiple difficulty modes, so if you really do just want to experience the story and the world and explore it and not get your ass handed to you by these overpowered orcs, then you can put it on easy. And conversely, if you really want a challenge and you want to really worry about sort of min-maxing and really testing your skills, we have a hard mode as well.
Okay, cool. You mentioned a glaive, which we haven't seen today, as far as I'm aware. Is that just one of the new weapons, and could you tell us a bit about it?
So the glaive, it's the spear. It's actually Celebrimbor's version of Aeglos, which was the spear Gil-galad used in the Second Age. And today he used it to sort of stamp the final finishing move on the Overlord to claim the fortress, but you can also use that in combat as well, so that gives us access to like big sweeping attacks and heavy attacks as well.
And obviously the big banner thing for the first game, and indeed this one, was your Nemesis system, which you're expanding massively. Can you tell us a bit more about that, kind of the features it brings, the new Nemesis system and the fortress assaults and such?
Yeah, again, probably the three big things with the Nemesis system is just enormously expanding the palette of the stories you can have with your enemies. So now there's more things that they remember, more events that they'll track and follow you and launch onto you in the world, more depth to their personality, more variety. So really creating these unique characters. Yeah. Then there's the fact that we've also extended it to your followers. So once you've had an enemy come and join you, he's now your follower. So now you can create other sorts of stories with him as you're leading him into battle, or he's helping you, or you're sending him off on missions. And once again, they're remembering and speaking to all of those stories. Yeah. And then third is the fact that we've extended it to the world as well. So to the fortresses, but also to the ambient life throughout the wilderness and the other strongholds and outposts in the world. So really expanded it in every dimension.
Right, okay. I probably asked you a similar question when I spoke to you about Shadow of Mordor, but it always makes my head kind of spin. How do you guys manage to kind of craft those personal stories? Because you must have to record thousands upon thousands of lines of dialogue and have thousands upon thousands of combinations of character to make every game unique. How do you even begin to do that?
It's just a lot of really hard work by a lot of really smart people. We have like a team dedicated just on the presentations. We have teams dedicated on the gameplay. The writing team of the lines and the dialogue is amazing. I think the real challenge actually isn't all of the individual components or all of the content, although there is a massive amount of content. Yeah. It's the cooperation and coordination to make all of those things work together, of the gameplay and the character art and the dialogue and the animation and the presentation and where they appear in the world. And just that teamwork is really the key element that makes it come together.
And on top of that as well, you've kind of layered a lot of new RPG elements that weren't in the first game as far as I know. So armors and gear and loot. Was that a whole other kind of challenge to kind of implement that too? Yeah,
so it's a design challenge, and it's also a balancing challenge as well, and it's a content challenge. But we really wanted to bring that into the game and do it in a way that works with the Nemesis system. So now when you hunt down and finally defeat this enemy that you love to hate, you now get this awesome piece of, whether it's a weapon or armor, that basically immortalizes these enemies that you have. And then we actually have challenges on the gear, depending on who the enemy was. And then when you complete those challenges, they'll unlock extra traits that could relate to that enemy. So for example, if he was a specialist in fire weapons, maybe you'll get fire damage on your critical hits and so on. So it's all trying to reinforce and support this idea of having these really memorable stories with these unique enemies.
And you have kind of distinct tribes of orcs as well now, so, and you've also got war trolls. Could you tell us a bit about the different tribes and how they kind of have their own visual kind of art styles essentially? And
yeah, so the different tribes are representing basically different cultures or societies of the orcs within Mordor. So it lets us really expand on that culture and how that works within the living world. And they all will then have different personalities that they'll attract to them as well. So again, these sort of memorable orcs. So if it's the Slaughter tribe, you might get some guy who's the butcher, who's obsessed with, you know, flesh and meat and wanting to eat everything that he sees. So it sort of gives us, again, a way to even further elevate and distinguish these really memorable personalities and have them visually represent that in terms of the different armor and gear and attachments and outfits and helmets and weapons. And it just brings a different, I guess, flavor and personality to the world as you explore it as well, because the influence of the tribes also extends to all of the just general grunts in the world and what they're talking about and what they're doing. So if it's the Mystic tribe, maybe they're doing a resurrection to or a ritual to raise the dead. If it's the Feral tribe, they might be on a hunt for a beast. So it just gives even more personality to the world.
And presumably you couldn't just call this game Shadow Mordor 2 because you've extended the world kind of out. How far kind of beyond Mordor have you gone with Shadow of War?
The key place is into the Gondorian city, so is to Minas Ithil, which is the sister city of Minas Tirith, which is the big siege that we see in Return of the King. So key was really bringing it out, seeing a human city, getting to fight alongside those human armies, experiencing that big epic siege, meeting those characters. So helping us establish the stakes of the story and kind of pay that off.
And talking about the story for a second, is it kind of freeing to essentially not strictly be canon? I mean, you're set between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, but strictly speaking, you guys aren't kind of canon, right? Does that free you up to kind of do what you want?
I think we have to be sure to be as authentic and accurate as possible that we can be to the events that are known within Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. But then in between that, we have to tell the most powerful and most epic story that we possibly can, so that we're telling a story that actually does resonate with and reflect what makes, for example, Return of the King or the Battle of Helm's Deep amazing. So we have to try and capture that essence and stay accurate within the known lore as well.
Could you, if you wanted to, kind of get familiar faces from the literature and the lore in there, if you wanted to, like You know, obviously people love to see Gimli, Legolas, Gandalf and all that. I mean, is there ever a temptation to get them in somewhere, kind of shoehorn them in?
Well, I think the thing we want to avoid is the shoehorning. Like, if they really fit the story and support the story, then we put them in. And we do have some key characters from the lore, and we do have Gollum returning, because obviously Mordor and the Ring of Power totally makes sense for him. He's very drawn to those things, and we introduce new characters. The character we're particularly excited about this time, or characters, is in Shadow of Mordor. We got to explore more of the backstory of Sauron and of him working together with Celebrimbor, and that was interesting because it's all there within the lore, but it's not normally sort of seen at the surface level or just in the film. So expanding that was exciting, and this time we get to do something similar with the Nazgul. So, because of course they're again very closely tied to Celebrimbor and the Rings of Power and Sauron. So getting to see some more of their history and flesh them out as characters and as villains as well.
Was there ever a temptation, obviously being a sequel, to kind of go with a clean slate in a way and move away from Talion's story and tell the story of another sort of protagonist within that realm, or were you always kind of dead set on continuing Talion's story?
I think in this case, because we hadn't finished telling Talion's story, we hadn't done everything that we wanted to do in Shadow of Mordor, so I think the thing we can say is that within this story, we're not leaving things hanging. This is really a complete story with what we think is a really strong ending and a strong finale that does kind of then flow directly into Lord of the Rings.
And did you ever see the tutorial kiss your wife thing becoming such a thing that everyone kind of latched onto and thought was, you know, funny and interesting?
Not I guess that we hoped that it would be picked up. Like, we were very deliberate about that, of taking that notion of affection and love and then going through that filter of his sort of death and revenge and using that to kind of map that same mechanic. So we were glad, and of course people interpret things in a whole range of different ways, so it was interesting to see the spectrum of that. But we were really happy people discussed it and talked about it and thought about it. Like, that's the most you can kind of hope for.
Is it difficult then to kind of top that, delivering your tutorial in a way that can live up to that, how you delivered it in the first game?
Yeah, intros are always really hard because you're trying to teach people and give them an on-ramp and get them into the story and load them with information. It's really hard, but I think we've done a good job this time too.
Final question, what single thing are you most excited about kind of players getting their hands on in the new game?
For one thing, it's the Nemesis system. It's just really surprising people with some of the characters that they're going to meet and create, and I think this time is how personal they're going to seem to them. That if we go on a thread and people are writing who's your favorite Nemesis, that we're just going to see such a huge range and variety of who those guys could be. So the game is out on August 25th of this year, and it's coming on Xbox, PC and PlayStation.